Welcome to this high-stakes explainer. Today, we're dissecting a match that, honestly, it felt less like a standard football game and way more like a cinematic, high-octane sports epic. The 23rd World Cup semifinal, France taking on Spain, a genuine clash of titans. Try to channel that electric tournament atmosphere right now. You know, the blinding stadium lights, the roar of the crowd, the sheer suffocating anticipation. We're going to break down all of it. The tactics, the heartbreak, the grueling physical toll, and the ultimate triumphs of this matchup. This wasn't just a game played on grass, guys. It was a profound masterclass in strategy, pressure, and absolute mental resilience. To really set the stage, there's this fantastic quote from the coverage, sewn together from the Bay of Biscay to the Mediterranean Sea, a classic European confrontation. And wow, doesn't that just hit the nail on the head? This wasn't just a semifinal. We're talking about two nations deeply intertwined by geography, by culture, and by a massive footballing heritage, just marching onto the pitch to absolutely tear into one another. The tension here was palpable. You've got generations of rivalry and completely contrasting philosophies of how the beautiful game should be played, all colliding on a single night. It literally carried the emotional intensity of a heavyweight title fight where nobody is willing to take a backward step. And the stakes? 1,500 miles. That's the exact distance northeast to New Jersey, where the ultimate prize, the World Cup final, awaited the victor. And the timeline? Just 5 agonizing days away. When you're that close to the absolute pinnacle of global sports, every single touch, every misplaced pass, every desperate defensive read is magnified hundredfold. You have the physical exhaustion of a deep tournament run, crashing headfirst into the psychological burden of knowing you're just 90 minutes away from immortality. Keep that immense pressure in mind as we analyze how it completely fractured one of these incredibly talented squads and somehow elevated the other. Okay, let's jump right into the first big turning point. Striking first, the penalty break. So we start out with some really early, aggressive French ambition. Bradley Barcola hurdles a challenge, looking super confident, and forces a crucial corner. The momentum feels heavy, right? It's tilting slightly toward the French. But then it violently, irreversibly swings. Lamine Yamal clever maneuvers his body into the perfect position inside the box. It's actually a total masterstroke of cunning. He half turns away from the defender, knowing full well that by establishing that physical real estate, there's a huge probability his opponent is going to recklessly catch him. He sets the bait. And Lucas Dean, he takes a hook, line, and sinker. Yamal crashes to the turf. Dean concedes the undeniable foul. It's just a split-second lapse in judgment, but in the crucible of a World Cup semifinal, it is a catastrophic, earth-shattering mistake. In the immediate aftermath, you could literally feel the penalty angst written all over the faces of French manager Didier Deschamps and Lucas Digne. They knew it. They knew it the absolute second the connection was made. You could practically feel the cold dread radiating from the French sideline. In a match defined by razor-thin margins, they realized instantly that they had just handed a massive, golden advantage to a Spanish side that you simply cannot afford to give an inch to. The game plan, the early momentum, the defensive solidity, it all just evaporates in the wake of that solitary whistle. Now, the penalty execution itself, absolute ice. There was no stutter-step approach, no hesitation, no mind games with the goalkeeper. Just a beautiful, decisive, and lethal strike directly to the opposite side. The composure required to step up under such immense, suffocating pressure and deliver with that level of perfection, it's breathtaking. Honestly, it provided a vivid glimpse of the World Cup final, and it immediately shoved France firmly onto their back foot. Striking first in a semifinal is one thing, but striking with that level of absolute unwavering certainty, that sends a profound, chilling message to the opposition. All right, moving into section 2, the beautiful Spanish masterclass, connectivity versus isolation. Here's where the tactical divide really becomes apparent. On one side, you have a desperate France frantically trying to drag isolated, heavily marked forwards like Kylian Mbappé and Barcola into the fray. They were ambitious, sure, but fundamentally disjointed. France was heavily relying on forcing the ball forward, basically praying for a moment of individual, heroic magic to bail their entire squad out of the mire. But on the other side, Spain was operating with a completely different geometry. They were executing this slick, beautiful football, a fluid, breathing system built on a deep, almost telepathic understanding between their players. Where France relied on isolated moments, Spain relied on a connected, impenetrable system that just moved as one cohesive unit. And this connected system was completely powered by their midfield maestros, who were frankly operating at the absolute peak of their powers. You had Lamine Yamal applying relentless, suffocating pressure high up the pitch, never giving the French defenders a second to breathe. Then there's Dani Olmo, utilizing his incredible cleverness on the ball, threading passes through impossibly tight spaces, and anchoring the whole shebang, Rodri, just lifting the ball out of immediate danger zones with total, undeniable command. This Spanish cohort, playing in this specific, connected mood, is an absolute nightmare for anyone. They form this hive mind that gives absolutely nothing away in defense, and the second they transition forward, they become a multi-headed, lethal threat. Let's see how that paid off in Section 3. Pedro Porro's crowning moment, the second strike. You see, when a team operates with that kind of telepathic midfield dominance, the opposing defense eventually inevitably fractures. It's like a giant puzzle coming apart. First, Spain establishes this comfortable, impenetrable defensive shape, calmly turning away those desperate French advances. Then, the trap is sprung. The transition is instantaneous. Dani Olmo, proving exactly why his vision is world-class, delivers this lovely, delicate knockoff pass that just completely opens up the world. And arriving perfectly on time is Pedro Porro, tearing into the space and dispatching the ball with the venom of a top-class striker. No doubt about the finish whatsoever. It was a tactical inevitability. Spain absolutely deserved this goal because they were systematically dissecting France all over the pitch. And his reaction? Man, look at those wild eyes. This was literally the moment of his professional life. Keep in mind, Pedro Porro came to this massive tournament without a single international goal to his name. So when he scored here, taking a slightly thick touch before explosively firing it into the back of the net, the raw emotion was palpable. Honestly, it felt straight out of an intense sports anime. You know, the underdog hero realizing his ultimate potential on the biggest stage imaginable, eyes wide with the adrenaline-fueled realization of what he had just accomplished. It was pure, unadulterated cinematic joy. But that made the score 2-0, a 2-goal deficit. For a footballing giant like France, possessing such profound culture and some of the deepest talent pools on the planet, finding themselves down 2-0 in a World Cup semi-final is practically uncharted territory. To put that into perspective, the mountain France suddenly had to climb wasn't just a physical test of endurance. It was this immense, crushing psychological burden. Overcoming a synchronized Spanish team is hard enough on its own, but doing so while carrying the weight of a 2-goal deficit on the global stage, that is a Herculean task. Which brings us to our final chapter, Section 4, France's desperate final stand, the unbreakable Spanish wall. Being down 2-0 means throwing caution entirely to the wind, pushing every available body forward, and basically praying for a miracle. But Spain? Spain began to systematically choke out the game through sheer defensive heroism. First, you have Marc Cucurella throwing his body on the line, getting a critical, physics-defying touch to spit a lethal Mbappe shot out for a corner. But the true architect of France's frustration was their goalkeeper, Unai Simon. His starting positioning was absolutely smashing. He operated flawlessly as a sweeper, constantly hovering off his line, reading the game beautifully, and neutralizing danger before France could even set their feet. His sheer aggressive decisiveness completely shattered the confidence of the French attack, ultimately smothering those final stoppage-time efforts. It really felt like the narrative was now or never for Kylian Mbappe. But as we saw, perhaps this time, it was never. Not today. We're so accustomed to watching Mbappe don the cape, acting as this ultimate safety net, the singular force of nature who can rescue a doomed match. But Spain's defense was an impenetrable fortress. They marked him flawlessly, surrounding him in a coordinated swarm, literally nipping the ball right off his toes at the most agonizing moments. The real tragedy for the French supporters was realizing that today would not be a rescue mission. The world's most dangerous attacker was completely, utterly shackled. In the dying breaths of the 90th minute, Ousmane Dembélé forces one last desperate effort on target, but once again, it's forcefully beaten out by the brilliant Unai Simon. The agonizing stoppage time slowly bleeds away for the French, with their scoreline permanently, stubbornly stuck at 0. The referee's whistle finally blows. The result is cemented in history, a truly spectacular wire-to-wire Spanish display. The story of this classic European confrontation is definitively told. 16. That is 16 long, agonizing years since Spain last reached this absolute pinnacle. Think about the wilderness years in between, the generations of players who came and went, the complex tactical shifts, the repeated heartbreak on the international stage. So this wasn't just a semifinal win, it is an incredibly historic triumph. It marks the definitive return of a footballing giant to the summit of the global game, proving that their deeply held philosophy of connected, beautiful football can still absolutely dismantle the strongest opposition in the world. So following this spectacular 2-0 display, one monumental question remains.
What does this Spanish masterclass mean for the ultimate final in New Jersey? Will this fluid, beautifully connected, telepathic system be enough to lift the ultimate trophy? Or will the immense, crushing pressure of the grandest stage write a completely different ending? It is a deeply fascinating question to ponder as we look ahead to the climax of this tournament. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and I'll catch you on the next one.